I never thought I'd watch my land, my family's land, drown in silence. But the sound that haunts me most isn't the rushing of floodwater or the groaning of drowned trees. It's the hollow thunk of concrete hitting the creek bed, the moment the WA decided they knew my property better than I did. My name's Daniel Mercer. My family's lived in Willow Bend Valley for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built the old farmhouse here, back when the creek ran crystal clear and the land was fertile and peaceful. That creek wasn't just a stream of water, it was a lifeline. It irrigated our crops, fed our livestock, and over the decades, carved out a small paradise in the valley. Then the WA came. 3 years ago, a development company bought the upper ridge overlooking my land. They built a gated community called Creekside Estates. The irony still makes me laugh. They named it after the same creek they later destroyed. At first, I didn't mind. I figured, let the rich folks have their homes up on the hill. I'd stay down here on my land and keep to myself. But when you give certain people a little power, they tend to believe they can control everything they see, even what's not theirs. It started small. The WA president, a woman named Karen, yes, her real name, no exaggeration, came down to discuss a boundary issue. She was all smiles, fake politeness, and perfumed air. Mr. Mercer, she said, in that condescending tone that people use when they think they're talking to someone beneath them. We've noticed your creek tends to overflow in spring. Some of our residents have expressed concerns about flooding near their retaining walls. Perhaps you could consider some drainage improvements. I just stared at her. Ma'am, I said, that creek's been flowing the same way for 100 years. Never once caused a problem unless someone messed with it. She smiled tighter. Well, maybe it's time for modernization. Our engineers could help manage it properly. I told her no, politely, but firmly. It was my land, my creek, my responsibility. A few weeks later, I found survey markers driven into the soil along my fence line. They weren't mine. The WA had sent a crew down, without permission, to measure runoff impact. I told them to leave. They laughed, said they had approval from the board. I didn't realize then just how far they'd go. The following summer, while I was away visiting my sister for 2 weeks, I came home to find the creek gone. In its place was a wide, ugly ribbon of gray concrete running through my property like a scar. They had poured an entire section of the creek bed full of cement. Not a pipe, not a culvert, just solid concrete, meant to redirect and stabilize flow. I couldn't believe it. Fish dead, trees wilting, the gentle gurgle that used to echo through my valley replaced by silence and the stench of wet cement. I confronted the WA the next morning. Karen was on her porch when I stormed up the hill. You trespassed, I said, voice shaking. You destroyed my creek. She didn't even blink. Mr. Mercer, that water was creating erosion near our retaining walls. We acted in the best interest of community safety. You should be grateful we improved the drainage. Improved. I nearly shouted. You poured concrete into a living stream. That's not improvement. That's destruction. She sighed. If you want to discuss compensation, you can take it up with our legal department. But we're done here. And with that, she walked inside, shutting the door in my face. I tried every legal channel I could. Environmental protection, county zoning, water management, but every office passed the buck. Turns out the HOA's developer had friends in all the right places. The permits were shady, the documentation vague, but technically, they'd found a loophole. By the time fall came, my land was dying. Without the creek's flow, the groundwater dried up. My crops wilted. The pond behind my barn cracked open like a dry lake bed. It felt like I'd lost a part of my family's soul. But nature has a funny way of taking revenge, patient, silent, and unstoppable. That winter, the rains came hard. The heaviest in 30 years. And because the WA had filled my creek, the main drainage for the entire valley, the water had nowhere to go. It gathered behind the concrete barrier they'd created, pooling higher and higher until it found new paths. Those paths weren't through my fields anymore, they were through their million-dollar homes. At first, I didn't even realize what was happening. I woke one morning to the sound of distant sirens and the smell of wet earth. When I stepped outside, I saw the ridge above my farm glistening, not with morning dew, but with standing water. By noon, the entire lower row of creekside estates was flooded waist deep. The pristine lawns and fancy driveways had turned into a swamp. Waterlogged basements, ruined cars, sewage backing up through their marble-tiled bathrooms. And Karen. She was standing knee-deep in muddy water, screaming at contractors, trying to blame poor drainage design. I didn't say a word. 2 weeks later, county engineers showed up, this time to investigate the flood damage. When they saw the filled-in creek, their faces went pale. The official report called it unauthorized obstruction of a natural waterway. Suddenly, those same loopholes that once protected the WA weren't worth much. The county fined them millions. Their insurance refused to cover the damage because it was a man-made environmental alteration. Home values plummeted. Half the residents left within 6 months. The development company went bankrupt. And Karen. She resigned from the board and quietly sold her house, at a loss. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I just stood by the edge of what used to be my creek, watching nature reclaim what it could. It took a full year for the rains to carve through the concrete, breaking it apart piece by piece, like the earth itself was rejecting what they'd done. By the second spring, water flowed again, slower, weaker, but alive. I rebuilt the banks, replanted the trees, and put up a small wooden sign where the creek bends near my barn. It reads, "You can't own nature, you can only respect it." Now, when I hear the soft trickle of water and the rustle of wind through the trees, I remember every lesson that creek taught me. Power built on arrogance always collapses, and those who think they can control nature eventually drown in their own mistakes. And as for the Hoas Swamp, it still sits up there on the ridge, a soggy, sunken monument to greed. The locals call it Lake Karen. I call it justice.